to this week's video. Coming up in this week's video, did you know that Albert Lee played the piano? And that his son is a brilliant singer? I remember that I did a video about Albert Lee's delay trick. I also remember that I did a video about the Country Boy intro. And, well, I didn't ever forget this one because it was quite recent, a little clip of me doing my tribute to Albert Lee. So, last weekend I went to see Albert Lee, who is one of my biggest guitar heroes. In fact, it's probably one of the last living one of my big guitar heroes, and it wasn't until I went to see him last weekend that it kind of dawned on me what a big influence he'd been. All the country stuff that I have in my playing really comes from copying his solos many years ago, and I realised that in my studio the only tab book I've got is this one. I mean, I haven't used it for a long time. Well, when I say that, I have used it since I went to see him, obviously, but this one's on my shelf over there. There might be a Stevie Ray Vaughan one there, but this was the only one I could find, actually. And I bought this in 1997 in a music shop in Scarborough called Bernard Dean, and it was $14.95. And I remember I was on a summer season, I remember sitting in my caravan practicing these solos, and there's several licks that I learnt from this book which I still play all the time. And I remember that I did a couple of videos about his playing as well recently on my YouTube channel when I sort of started doing it weekly in anger. Well, I wasn't angry, but when I started doing it weekly during lockdown, I did one video where I compared playing the intro to Country Boy on acoustic and electric, which I'll show you in a sec, and then I did a video on the delay trick. I'll link to some of those videos here so you can have a look at them, but the clever delay trick that he does at the end of Country Boy. So I'm just going to show you those two videos now. Yeah, so it's funny, I didn't really realise until I went to see Albert, and here's a photo of me with him, what a big influence he was on me. I had his album Hiding, which is the one with Country Boy and everything on it, which I used to play loads and loads. I had it on vinyl, and for some reason you can't get that album on Spotify or any of the digital platforms. You can only buy it on old sort of second-hand CDs on Amazon, but they did have a copy at the gig and I didn't buy one. I was so worried about getting that photo that I just showed you, so I didn't get a signed copy. Glenn, who I went with, did get a signed copy, so I think I'm going to have to go and see him again, because also I thought to myself, I wish I'd got him to sign this book, because when I was there I was thinking, I wonder if he ever met Eddie Van Halen, not because they were both Music Man endorsees at the same time, and he did, because there's a photo of him there with him. Also, very briefly, I worked for a record company back in the early 90s, I think it must have been, and they had Albert Lee signed, I think, to them at the time, and there was one live album, Albert Lee and Hogan's Heroes live at Montreux. Now that album is on Spotify actually, and that's really good, so it's got some great pedal steel from Jerry Hogan on it as well. But this wasn't the first time that I've seen Albert live. This was the first time I've seen him doing an entire gig live. Many years ago, and I don't know if they still do these, but they used to have these big music industry events at Wembley. I think it was at the Conference Centre or something like that. It's a huge hall with every musical instrument manufacturer and distributor having their own stand there. And they'd have, in one of the side rooms, they'd have performances put on by various different artists. And I remember going to see Albert Lee and his band one time, this must have been early 90s, going to watch him there, and it was fantastic. I remember watching him, looking at him, thinking, he doesn't look like he's going to be able to play all that amazing stuff that he does on record. And then he did, and it was amazing. And the second time I saw him was a friend of mine, Paul, who sadly died a couple of years ago. He was the agent who got me all my first work, and he's also my eldest daughter's godfather. he managed to get hold of Albert to go and do a kind of masterclass at just a pub club in Worthing, near to where I live, and he turned up with his backing tracks, and he did all of his sort of famous solos and talked about his gear and everything, and that was absolutely brilliant. There was only a sort of small room of 50 or so people in, because Albert is a Music Man endorsee, and strangely the UK distributor of Music Man guitars, they've just moved recently in the last year, but they used to be, and if I look out of my window here I could see the warehouse where they distribute all of music. They do Music Man, Elixir Strings, Ernie Ball, these stands, Hercules stands. It's one of the big distributors called Strings and Things, and it used to be almost as the crow flies, about 200 yards away. There's a river in the way, but they've just moved. They're still not very far away. But so Albert, I think he used to go down there, and he'd, as one of the UK-based artist endorsees of Music Man, he was often there, and I think that's how Paul managed to get hold of him. But yes, I saw him in Worthing close up at a masterclass. This was early 90s as well. I do have a good story about that music fair at Wembley though. I've got somewhere, and I haven't had time to dig it out today, I've got a signed poster. It's a Marshall Blues Breaker, the one that was on that Eric Clapton used on that Blues Breakers album. The one where he's reading the Beano on the front, and I got it signed by Jim Marshall. Jim Marshall used to go to these music fairs and stand at the Marshall stand, and I remember getting him to sign it. It says something to Tom, best wishes from Jim Marshall. I shall have to dig that out for a future video. But another good story about one of these music fairs, I went with he was my flatmate back then. He was in my band from when we were about 15, 16, we had a band together. Ben Nichols, who is the bass player with Seth Lakeman amongst lots of other people. He plays with lots of well-known folk artists, and I went with him, and he was we were just standing around. I don't think I went with him this particular occasion, but he had a good story. He was standing around talking to this guy who was on the Fender stand, and he had a Telecaster there, a guy with a beard, and he's sort of chatting to him, and they're talking about, not sure about that stand over there, don't think much about that, and they're just chatting away, and then all of a sudden the guy that Ben was chatting to, he stands up with his Telecaster and starts playing this ridiculously good sort of chicken picking guitar playing. Turned out it was Jerry Donahue, who was being paid by Fender to endorse their guitars, and he was just Ben didn't realise and just started chatting to him like he was another member of the public. So I always like that story. So on to the gig. Now the gig was in a place called Godalming, which is in Surrey, which for those of you in America is just south of London, and it's put on by a company called Eclectic Music. If you look them up, they put on lots of good gigs with good artists in the Surrey area. And they had a last minute support slot. They weren't going to have a support band, but last minute they decided to, and it was an artist called Talia Simon, who's a local country singer. She writes her own stuff with her own band. So I'll show you a little clip of that as I filmed. Had some pretty good songs, and she did have the most enormous water bottle I've ever seen anybody drinking out of on stage. It was one of those ones that was about that big, and it had how much you're supposed to drunk by the time of day. 7 a.m. you should have drunk that much. I only know this because I had a front row seat. A bit nerdy that, isn't it? Sitting right in the front, right under Albert. What was quite funny though, the two guitarists, there seemed to be a bit of tension and competition between the two guitarists. They both had very nice gear. And the guitarist on the right, I think it's called Ian or something, can't remember. He obviously had, the guitarist on the left, to me as I'm looking at them, had too much of his guitar in his monitor, and he started complaining, he started swearing. I would say normally the way you deal with that is you locate where the sound man is and go, him down in there, but no, he was sort of swearing and talking over the microphone. I can't hear myself. Anyway, that aside, I thought that was quite funny, but yes, they did a good set. And then when they finished, this was the first surprise of the evening. I'm going to show you some video here. Albert, despite the fact he has played with Eric Clapton, Emmylou Harris, the Everly Brothers, the Crickets, I found a photo of him playing with Willie Nelson, he seemed to be quite happy to come out on stage after the support band finished and help sort of set the gear up and change the stage around, and I took some videos of that just because I found it quite surprising. Also in the video you can see the sound man reconfiguring the speakers, and I'll come on to that. He was a new sound man that Eclectic Music hadn't used before, because the guy he's been using for 30 years has finally retired. So they did have a few teething problems with the sound, but I shall come on to that. So let's see a clip of Albert playing first. Now here's a bit of what he's best known for, I guess, that kind of chicken picking, fast playing. Here was a bit of nice playing that can't remember what the song is, but I'll just show you this just to show you what it sounded like from where I was sitting. And now a slightly slower song, and I want to show you this one because the band, they were fantastic. The band, they were, let me check who it is, I wrote it down. There were two brothers. There was Ali Petrie on keys, Ian Petrie on bass, and Ollie Sears on drums. And they're a really good band, and they did some lovely harmonies. They all three of them sung with Albert, and you can't really hear it that well on this video, but I'm going to show you a bit of it, and then a nice guitar solo that Albert did on this kind of slower tune. Now, a second surprise to me here, as I mentioned at the top of the video, is I didn't realise that Albert Lee played the piano. He's a rather good piano player. And actually I've since found out he did play piano on some of the, he did a couple of solo things on some of his albums, because I found in this book, one of the transcriptions, which I've never looked at, is a piano transcription. Anyway, I'll have to work on that. You'll see at the beginning of this video, I'm going to show you this, he sat down and he said he was going to play some Jimmy Webb songs. Now, I love Jimmy Webb. Here's a photo of me with Jimmy Webb. I met him several years ago when he played locally here, and he signed my book that he wrote, which I was very pleased with. It's a treasured possession of mine. And Albert Lee did two of his songs. The first one, I can't remember what it was called. I wrote it down and I have found it. It was a more recent one, but the one that he played second, which is one of my all-time favourite songs, is The Highwayman, which Albert's done. There's versions of that, him playing that live on some of his live albums. But you'll also hear at the beginning of this clip, he sits down, starts playing, and he says to the rest of the men, "Is the piano in the PA?" Because he can't hear it at all. So bearing in mind, he did this whole thing and he couldn't really hear the piano, but he's pitch perfect. And this is a funny thing to say, but one of the things I really, really like about Albert, as much as a guitar player, I love his voice. On that album Hiding, I just really, really like his voice, and his voice is still great. So I want to show you this, but it does highlight the PA problems they were having. As I say, they had a new guy come in, and part of the problem, it was very difficult to hear. I heard people complaining in the interval that they couldn't hear the vocals. I think part of it, and this is only my opinion, I think being sat where I was, the guitar was quite loud on stage, and I think that's because Albert couldn't hear himself. And I looked at the monitors, and they seem to have all these various front of house speakers, like double bass bins, double tops, and the monitors they have are those furry Behringer Euro Live speakers, which I wouldn't have classed as sort of professional standard PA equipment, and that's what Albert had in front of him. So I think he was struggling with the sound, because halfway through the first set he turned up his guitar even more, because he obviously couldn't hear himself, which kind of drowned the vocals out even more. But I don't think it wasn't Albert's fault. I think, you know, his monitors weren't right. They were struggling with them in the sound check. That little clip I showed you earlier, they seem to be having the sound, but they did sort it out. It was much better in the second half, and, you know, to be fair to them, it was the first time the guy had done the sound in that room. So hopefully in future events it shall be a bit clearer. But that's not to say that the sound was terrible. The vocals were a bit quiet, but you could still hear what was going on, and I thoroughly enjoyed it anyway. So finally, I'm rambling on here, aren't I? Here's a little clip of Albert playing a bit of a Jimmy Webb song on piano. Actually, I forgot to video any of The Highwayman, which is a terrible shame because I love that song, but I was enjoying it so much. And I hate videoing at these gigs, I just want to watch it. And I did hold, because I was front row, I held my camera here, my phone here, and pointing up. And since I've come back and looked at the video, most of the time I was filming the ceiling because I wasn't looking at what I was doing, I just wanted to watch. Also, I felt a bit paranoid. I thought they're going to look down and see that I'm filming and they might not like it. So anyway, these bits of footage were from Glenn, who was sat next to me, and he was filming properly and looking what he was doing. So thank you, Glenn. I went with Glenn. We both sat next to each other on the front row. So the next surprise of the evening was, I didn't know, or I did have a vague recollection, someone had told me that Albert's son is also a musician, and he got up in the encore and he sung, first of all, White Shade of Pale. I'm going to show you a little clip of this. He got an absolutely amazing voice. And then in the next song he did this rather marvellous piano solo. I'm going to show you a clip of that. And finally, I have to show you this, a little clip of Albert playing Country Boy, because I think that's his signature piece, isn't it, really? And I have to say, I've got to mention it, and don't really want to, but Albert has definitely slowed down a bit. But he is 80. He was 80 at the end of last year. This is his 80th year tour. But the thing is, he still sounds absolutely fantastic. His voice sounds great. The thing is with his playing, it was all about that really fast chicken picking to a large degree. So lots of his contemporaries like Clapton, he was never a fast player, so his playing's not going to be as affected quite as much by getting older. But it's like watching these tennis stars who, you know, do these sort of exhibition things or these veteran things. They're not going to be able to compete at the highest level anymore because of their age, but they've still got the most phenomenal technique and they're amazing to watch. And it was same with Albert. He's maybe lost the edge on the speed of his playing, but his playing is still great and musical and lovely, and I'm so glad I went to see it. And it's just great that he's still playing. He's out there, he's touring, he's 80 years old. I mean, I hope I can still play reasonably well when I'm 80, because it does have an effect on you, and some people, you know, they have to stop before they're 80, so it's great that Albert's out there doing it, still sounding great, his voice is sounding great, and his guitar sounding great. So here's a little bit of Country Boy. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. I certainly enjoyed the gig, and I would encourage you, if you see him touring, I think he's still touring, doing his 80th birthday tour for the rest of the month. So there's some more UK dates, and I did look, he was touring in the States, but that might have already gone. But I urge you to go and see him, because it was still a brilliant night, and I'm slightly tempted to go again for two reasons. One, I should have bought a signed CD, and two, I want him to get to sign my tab book. But whether I can actually make it to another one is a different matter. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please hit like, leave me a comment, hit subscribe as well if you like. I shall bring out new videos. Well, I do bring out new videos weekly on Friday, 7 PM UK time. So I hope to see you next week. But before I leave you, I'm going to leave you with my tribute to Albert Lee. One of the songs on my debut album is called Funky Country Boy, and I took loads of references from Albert Lee's Country Boy, and I put a kind of half-time shuffly rhythm, but I incorporated loads of musical references to Albert's Country Boy's song, including a sort of double-time fast solo over the same chord sequence at the end. And I used that delay trick, which I showed at the beginning of this video, on my recording of it. So you can check that out on Spotify. It's called Funky Country Boy, and it's on my album Long Game. Well, I'm going to leave you with this clip. I'll leave the full version on here of my gig that I did with my band, of us playing it live. So I hope you enjoy that, and I hope to see you next week.
that second hand is slowing down. Them bigger hands ain't even going round. Worked here so long, I've got the window seat. That's Georgian pines and mountains far as I can see. But I trade this office chair and computer for a bullhide saddle and an Appaloosa. Set my out of office permanently, and the city limit signs way behind me. I don't suit this 9 to 5. I don't suit this suit and tie. Grab my hat and my guitar, play some wail on in halftime. This is where the weekend starts. I take the mic and play my part, 'cause I'm a funky country boy at heart. I'm a weekend cowboy, don't get me wrong. I got the clothes and I know the songs. My boots are tight, but they're looking fine. Handmade in snakeskin, they're top of the line. But I know how to play this guitar. Chicken picking all night over, fall on the floor. A Monday morning with my best suit on, I can still hear everybody singing along. I don't suit this 9 to 5. I don't suit this suit and tie. Grab my hat and my guitar, play some wail on in halftime. This is where the weekend starts. I take the mic and play my part. I'm a funky country boy at heart. This 9 to 5. I don't suit this suit and tie. Grab my hat and my guitar, play some wail on in halftime. This is where the weekend starts. Take the mic and play my part. I'm a funky country boy at heart. Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen.
Do you want another one? That's good. I was going to pretend to walk off, but I realised there wasn't anywhere to go. I was going to go over there and probably stand in a cupboard for like...